Good morning and welcome to the OBX Wave Report for December the 29th. I am Robert Scribbler and I am here to talk to you guys about all things waves, weather, climate, and beach lifestyle. And we're also going to talk about some climate action here and there throughout the US, throughout the OBX Wave Report as we try to raise support for fighting for coastline defense against the impacts of climate change driven by fossil fuel burning. And once again, welcome to the OBX Wave Report for December the 29th. I am back here on location in the Outer Banks after a brief holiday hiatus with my family. Thank you for hanging out with me during the Christmas holidays, but we are back for the New Year's, and boy, what a year this promises to be for 2023 for us here in the Outer Banks, and we're going to share it with you all. Now, for this morning, we are right now looking at a satellite shot of the US East Coast, which has enjoyed cool and clear conditions throughout, I would say, the last 3 days or so following the impacts of a severe bomb cyclone system that bombed out over the Great Lakes region and produced widespread impacts across the United States and into Canada. And in particular, the story right now is focusing on Buffalo, New York, which has seen very severe impacts from high precipitation storm events over December. I believe in some places receiving as much as 100 inches or nearly 100 inches of snow over December, and in this one extreme storm event receiving in the 40 to 50 inch range. So very powerful, very widespread impacts for Buffalo, New York, and across the US as well, where we saw mass power outages and heavy snowfall as well. But thankfully for today, for the US East, things are much more placid. And particularly here in the Outer Banks, we are experiencing very pleasant conditions, particularly for the wintertime, as clear skies, calm winds, and 50-degree temperatures dominate. And we are also seeing a nice, smooth, glassy, rideable swell rolling in from the Atlantic Ocean with wave heights in most places ranging from 2 to 3 feet with up to 4 foot wave heights in some locations. So here is a beautiful satellite picture of the US East Coast focusing in on the Outer Banks here where we are reporting today. And looking at the infrared satellite shot, we can also see that large area of calm weather dominating over the east. Although we've got a big dip in the jet stream pulling in some stormy weather here across the west, and the stormy weather riding up through the central US and into southern Canada. I would also like to point out this boundary here, this very large uh, frontal boundary between cooler and drier air and moist air and warmer air, and that stretches in from the eastern Pacific across Mexico and then across the Gulf of Mexico, south of the Keys, through the Bahamas, out south and east of Bermuda, and on out into the central North Atlantic. It's a very striking feature that runs across the entirety of our infrared satellite map provided by Tropical Tidbits here. And this area of disturbed weather is something worth keeping an eye on as it can be a zone for storm formation and the generation of various low pressure systems as the warmer, moist air comes into conflict with the colder, drier air. So something to keep an eye on just generally. And in this weather shot, in this satellite shot, I thought I would point out the just striking nature of this feature because it's very interesting to me here. Something that definitely we want to keep an eye on. So in any case, for the waves, for the Outer Banks, looking at the wave models, which we tend to do, we're seeing an average about 3 to 4 foot significant wave heights off the Outer Banks, with the swell running in consistently from the south and east. These waves are marching all the way across the Atlantic Ocean here and then turning off toward the north and west as they march toward the coastline. And so we have a long period swell that is running into the Outer Banks in the range of about 2 to 4 feet. And this swell is expected to continue in its character throughout at least the next week and possibly for a longer period of time. Looking at the long range forecast, we're expected to see 2 to 4 foot, maybe 2 to 5 foot swells just consistently running in through the Outer Banks over at least the next week time period. So some pleasant and relatively calm conditions, but some nice rideable surf coming into the Outer Banks for the predictable future, for the expected future. So as we typically do, I am going to go zoom in on some locations throughout the Outer Banks. And we are going to start off with Jeanette's Pier, which is funded by the National Renewable Energy Lab. I find that to be extraordinarily cool. But in any case, we're going to start off at Jeanette's Pier with wave heights ranging from 2 to 3 feet at Jeanette's Pier today. The primary swell for those larger waves in the range of about 2.5 to 3 feet is coming in at about 9 seconds. And the secondary swell is coming in at 13 seconds. Winds are out of the west at 9 miles per hour, so very gentle winds running offshore here at Jeanette's Pier. The air temperature at Jeanette's Pier is in the lower 50s. I've gotten readings from 49 to 52. I'm just going to say that the air temperature down there is 52 degrees. The ocean water temperature is 55 degrees, coming up a bit from the past couple of days. There was probably some interaction with much colder air that came in and the near surface waters. Now we're getting more of a Gulf Stream type influence as those ocean water temperatures warm up to more seasonable averages. And the weather predicted for today for Jeanette's Pier is sunny with an expected high temperature today of about 54 degrees Fahrenheit. And we could see some variance. It could be a little bit warmer. Sometimes it does tend to be a little bit warmer down there near the coastline with the ocean influence. So moving on down the coastline, we're going to go on past Oregon Inlet to Road Anthony. And we're going to go to the Road Anthony Pier and beach access and provide you with some information about Road Anthony. Right now, Road Anthony, the wave heights are ranging from 2 to 3 feet as well. So 2 to 3 feet waves are just running in over many of the northeast facing beaches here. Same is true with S-turns and Avalon as well. So, but 2 to 3 foot waves coming in at Road Anthony Pier. The primary swell is coming in at 10 seconds, and the secondary swell is coming in at 13 seconds with those 2 to 3 foot waves coming in with the primary swell. Winds are out of the west at 8 miles per hour, which is an offshore wind as well. Very placid, very gentle, very glassy conditions down there at Road Anthony Pier. Air temperatures are ranging around 53 degrees Fahrenheit at Road Anthony, with ocean water temperatures considerably warmer at 63 degrees Fahrenheit. So warmer ocean water conditions, but still very cool. So you're going to need your 3-4, likely your 3-4 wetsuits, maybe your 2-3s, depending on how resilient you are to the cold. Weather conditions are sunny at Road Anthony with an expected high of 54 degrees Fahrenheit for today. And then for our last surf location for today, we're going to go on down the coastline to Hatteras. And I'm just going to zoom on out here past Avon, and we're going to go to beach access ramp number 43 near Hatteras Light Station, which is now back here after its move away from the coastline as it was threatened by sea level rise and moving coastline. And we're going to go down to the beach access ramp. We're going to walk over the dunes and we're going to find that wave heights at Hatteras are in the 2 to 4 foot range, so a little bit taller there. The only larger spot is, of course, Buxton at 3 to 4 feet. So Hatteras getting those 2 to 3 foot waves coming in there. And those waves are coming in with a primary swell of also 10 seconds and a secondary swell of 13 seconds. So very consistent on the wave timing there. Winds are out of the west-northwest at 8, so also very gentle offshore winds here at Hatteras Beach access, and the air temperature is about 53 degrees Fahrenheit, with the ocean water temperature also a little bit warmer at 65 degrees Fahrenheit. You're still going to need your cold weather protection, but with those ocean water temperatures in the 60s and air temperatures in the 50s, it's nowhere near as frigid as it has been over recent days. And it's just generally very calm, very pleasant conditions for a winter surf session, so long as you have your you know, cold weather protection, your wetsuits available. Weather conditions are sunny down at Hatteras with an expected high today of 56 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's a basic rundown of wave conditions across the Outer Banks with 3 select locations. And once again, waves are coming in typically in the range of 2 to 3 feet for most beaches, with 2 to 4 foot or even 3 to 4 foot waves at the larger wave spots for today. Looking out further on in the forecast, there is a feature that I did want to call your attention to in the global forecast system model, and this is the this is the model from earlier this morning when I was putting together the OBX wave report for you guys a little while ago. We didn't have the most updated model fully loaded yet in this program that we use over on Tropical Tidbits. But there is one feature that I did want to point out to you in the approximate 10-day forecast range. And what we're looking at here in the global forecast system model is the potential formation of a nor'easter forming just off the eastern seaboard with a disturbed weather pattern coming in across Florida associated with that frontal boundary that I pointed out to you earlier. This frontal boundary is expected to back up toward the US East Coast over the next 10 days, and then by about January 6th, according to the global forecast system model, we're expected to start seeing a low pressure form off of Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina here, which is then expected to strengthen as it moves off toward the Outer Banks, and then continue to strengthen off the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast, the U.S. Northeast, with relatively well organized coastal system here, dropping down into the 990 and then upper 980 millibar range, with strong winds coming in from the east and then the northeast and then the northwest, and a potential winter storm here for the northeast. But for the Outer Banks, we would expect from this kind of system near gale force conditions, northeast winds, and heavy rains if this system does organize as expected. It's not expected to be in a terribly intense system, so nothing crazy, no bombification like we saw up here around the Great Lakes area, or no severe bombification, although strengthening from the 1010 millibar range to the upper 980s is still a pretty rapid intensification cycle. Of course, this system is expected to form in about the 9 to 10 day range. It's about 9 to 10 days out. So you can take these forecasts with a grain of salt and just consider the fact that this is a long range forecast. It's less likely to line up exactly how the models are predicting, but what the models do show is a tendency for a potential nor'easter to form in the 9, maybe 8 to 10, 8 to 11 day time period. So something that we're going to want to keep a lookout for over this time, even as we enjoy much calmer and pleasant conditions here for the Outer Banks. I did also want to talk a little bit more about the tendency in the models for the 8 to 14 day outlook going into January 5th through the 11th. And the National Weather Service and its Climate Prediction Center is showing temperatures in the range of above average to considerably above average for the Outer Banks, which is nice. We could be expecting much more pleasant conditions over the coming week or so, and a tendency for above average precipitation for the region, although not as not pointing to as potent a potential for storms as out here over the US West Coast. Nonetheless, we are looking at a slightly higher tendency for storm formation, particularly here near the coast. So once again, we are looking at a tendency in the models for a little bit more storminess for the US East Coast and in particular the Outer Banks. One of the factors that we tend to look at for storminess is the jet stream. Yesterday, I was talking about how there's a tendency for a trough to form over the US East. In the more recent models, it actually seems like we've got a flux between ridge and trough formations riding in across the US East Coast. And over the next few days, you've get a little dip in the jet stream with a possible impulse, but then a ridge begins to form with a high pressure system again toward the end of the week, toward January 2nd. Well, I guess that would be around Sunday and the Monday timeframe. So what we're seeing right now for the Outer Banks is a shift between troughs and ridges. And this is what you would tend to expect with the orderly progression of weather patterns across the United States. In general, wave conditions are now in the range of 3 to 4 feet in the offshore environment. And looking at the longer term picture, waves are expected to improve a little bit over the forecast period, but remain in about the same range where they are now. Occasionally, you'll get a stormy impulse off the US East Coast, which will provide a little bit more surf. But for the Outer Banks itself, surf conditions are expected to range, I think most likely in the 2 to 5 foot, maybe occasionally getting some 6 foot wave patterns. But most of the models are showing a very consistent 2 to 5 foot forecast for the next week or so. And advancing this model, again, we see consistent waves in the range of 3 to 6 feet in the near offshore environment. With those waves tend to come down as they come in onshore, but these wave models are consistent with the nearer coastal wave forecast. So that's our wave report for today. We're looking at very calm conditions, very pleasant conditions across the Outer Banks, and we are looking at a forecast for the future of rideable surf for at least the next week or so, with a potential for a moderate strength nor'easter, maybe something a little bit stronger in the 10-day time frame. So something to look out for as we continue keeping track of wave conditions for the Outer Banks for you guys. So thank you for joining me for the Thursday, December 29th edition of the OBX Wave Report. I will be getting back to you shortly with some supplements. I know we haven't had any supplemental reports recently, but we're going to get some observations from the coast for you today of the very pleasant conditions. And we have some more supplements planned for you today. So we're likely to get back to our schedule of 2 to 4 total video summaries for you per day as we settle back down into the Outer Banks and get ourselves back up to speed here. So thank you for joining me once again, and please remember to do everything you can to help save our beautiful coastlines from the impacts of climate change driven primarily by fossil fuel burning and doing all you can to help our world rapidly transition to clean energy and to overcome the hurdles that are put in place by legacy energy interests, including in politics and in utilities and in the manufacture of machinery and equipment, particularly for transportation. Let's just do everything we can to overcome those hurdles and rapidly deploy clean energy for the betterment of all of us living here on this earth, and specifically for the OBX wave report for focusing in also on coastal defense. So thank you for joining me again, and I will be back with you shortly.